Okay, we are in part 5, I think, of this. So Joseph, son of Jacob, a little quiz here. The titles have all been 2 words. The first one was what? Joseph, son of Jacob, part 1 was what? I've given you half of it right there.
The pit?
The pit. Very good. All right, the pit. Unpleasant hope and unpleasant circumstances, certainly it was that. Part 2, another P word. What was after the pit?
Prison.
The prison, there you go. Way to go, Paul. The prison, integrity amid adversity. All right, the pit, the prison. Third one. Oh, sorry. The palace. The third one was the palace, right? Promoted from the prison to the palace, Genesis 40, 41. Number 4 was? Oh boy, you must have had a full day yesterday because I already gave you the answer and that was it right there, the pardon. Okay, that was part number 4, the pardon. When Joseph revealed himself to his brothers and that pardon that came, that was the releasing of guilt on their part. For 13 years, carrying that weight of sending their brother away to prison. Okay? All right, another one this morning here as I was reviewing this, kind of added this one in between 2 others. But another P word, Tom, for you. But Genesis 45, this one here is the provision. But before we get to that, the revealing, Joseph revealing himself, we hadn't really talked about that last week because it was a pretty full one. Here is the passage here from Word of Promise CD.
He could not restrain himself before all those who stood by him.
Make everyone go out from me.
So no one stood with him while Joseph made himself known to his brothers. And he wept aloud. The Egyptians and the house of Pharaoh heard it. Then Joseph said to his brothers,
I am Joseph. Does my father still live?
But his brothers could not answer him, for they were dismayed in his presence.
Please, come near to me.
So they came near.
I am Joseph, your brother, whom you sold into Egypt. But now do not therefore be grieved or angry with yourselves because you sold me here. For God sent me before you to preserve life. For these 2 years the famine has been in the land, and there are still 5 years in which there will be neither plowing nor harvesting. And God sent me before you to preserve a posterity for you in the earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. So now, it was not you who sent me here, but God. And he has made me a father to Pharaoh, and lord of all his house, and a ruler throughout all the land of Egypt. Hurry, and go up to my father and say to him, Thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me, do not tarry. You shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children, your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. There I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. And behold, your eyes and the eyes of my brother Benjamin see that it is my mouth that speaks to you. So you shall tell my father of all my glory in Egypt, and of all that you have seen. And you shall hurry and bring my father down here.
Then he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Benjamin wept on his neck. Moreover, he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. And after that, his brothers talked with him.
All right, that brings us up here to our story here today. I wanted to get that revealing because we didn't take the time last week to read through that. What a great moment in that story of Joseph revealing himself to his brothers. Think about what that moment may have been like. So, Joseph, son of Jacob, part 5 here this morning, the provision. The provision here. Because we're going to see here in this as well, God's hand written all over this story. That is actually a carving from ancient Egypt there of 2 donkeys. So very fitting to be a part of this story right here. So the provision here regarding this, never late and always enough. This is what the way the Lord does it. And we can testify to that. We've been talking about that a little bit this morning. And the Lord going before, and when He does it right. And He does it good. And He does it in an astounding way. And this was the case here too. So Joseph has revealed himself to his brothers. The provision now that is going to occur is pretty astounding when you think about it. Okay, so Genesis 45, and we'll start reading in verse 16. For the first of the provision now, the first of the provision is from Pharaoh himself. Verse 16 says, Now the report of it was heard in Pharaoh's house, saying, Joseph's brothers have come. So it pleased Pharaoh and his servants well. Okay? This here, think about this. These were Hebrews. These were nobody in the eyes of the Egyptian people. Not only that, but they were shepherds who were detested by the Egyptians. But yet, this report of Joseph's brothers showing up in Egypt is good news in Pharaoh's court. Hey, that says something. It speaks about God's orchestration and human decision in this. Okay, I refer to this as the blend. I mean, the whole of the outflowing of human history here is a combination of God's oversight and human decision. Okay, it's that blending of the gear, so to speak, that enables the thing to come together. That perfect blend, because God's hand clearly evident in this story. There's no question about that. But throughout the story, in the 4 parts before this, we've been talking about Joseph and his response and his attitude, his character, his integrity, and how that was setting the stage in order for him to be used the way God wanted to use him. So God's hand is evident, humanly speaking, because of Joseph being benevolently faithful in service to Pharaoh. This is what has transpired. The encouragement here then, man, live in the blend. This is where right the sweet spot where we want to be. We want to be in the flow of what God is doing, and we want to be a component available in our decision making for God to use us at His timing and in His way. Not our way, His way, and His timing. Because when that happens, as we have been making note of, that is when it's good. That's when it's perfect, when it's to its fullest extent. So, in some ways, we can understand this. Okay? If you're going to meet someone's family and you like that person, generally we're like, oh man, I'd love to meet your parents. I'd love to meet your family. Now take the opposite as true. You're a cantankerous person, you're critical, you're negative and all that. Mom and dad are coming to town. Oh, my parents are coming down. What's the other person thinking? Oh boy. I don't know if I want to meet that family. If mom and dad or the brothers are anything like him, boy, I don't know if I would care about it. That's not what the response was. Part of their response we have to equate was Joseph's faithfulness, Joseph's benevolence, Joseph's gentleness even in this whole process. Joseph's giving of himself for the Egyptian people, because remember, there was a famine in the land. It's 2 years into the famine. It was Joseph's dreams and Joseph's administration of the care of the 7 years of plenty that they're able to live comfortably now. So all of this is a part of playing into God's hand and the human decision involved in this as well. Not the first time this has happened in the Scriptures. Well, actually, in the early times it has happened, but many other times. Daniel, the prophet Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, Daniel served faithfully. So when he got thrown into the lion's den, Nebuchadnezzar did it out of obligation as his position, but he didn't want to do it because Daniel was such a faithful man. How about Queen Esther? Okay, remember Nebuchadnezzar, Queen Esther, for marrying Ahasuerus, a pagan king, but yet she served him faithfully to where it came a point where she could be a major catalyst to saving her people. Nehemiah, okay, the building of the walls and the building of the temple back in Jerusalem when King Artaxerxes says to do it. Prior to that, Ezra under Cyrus' reign went, but Cyrus was a priest, but Nehemiah himself was a cupbearer to the king. Him serving faithfully in a pagan environment with a pagan king, not compromising, because none of the people I've mentioned have compromised in any way. But yet, their human decision set the stage for God to use them in a great way, even in a pagan environment. And that was the case. Maybe not as much as significant from a scriptural overarching thing, but there's a man by the name of Dallas Willard. Some of you may be familiar with that name. Dallas Willard actually is a graduate of the university that I went to before I was there, but Dallas Willard is with the Lord now, but he's just known as a very good thinker and, never compromised on that. And he was actually for a period of time, he was the director of philosophy of all things. Director of philosophy in the philosophy department at USC. I mean, you're talking the hub of secular, carnal thinking there down in the University of Southern California, but Dallas Willard was the chairman of that department. And never compromised on the truth of Scripture, and has written many books. The Divine Conspiracy is one of the more famous ones. The Great Omission. I have one now that I downloaded. I would like to read about the significance of gentleness and how that may be the very best method that we could be witnessing to the world around us. And certainly that's evident in the life of Joseph. So all that to say, let's strive for this. We see these examples of people in an environment that is not pleasant. We may have to shed the Pittsburgh part of us a little bit, where we want to take on the world and dig in and I don't care, and you bunch of idiots, we're going to do that. But to function in a Christian way, in an honoring way, we have use of the Lord without compromise. And that's the key. Because certainly that was not at all in these individuals I've mentioned here. Let's strive to be this. For the Lord's purpose, should he desire it for us. So Joseph's attitude was that God had him there to help, not hinder. We read that when he revealed himself, he said, "You didn't send me here." What do you mean they didn't send him here? They threw him into the pit, they sold him into slavery. What do you mean you didn't send him here? Joseph said, "You didn't send me here, God sent me here." And through those 13 years of great trial, now we see why God sent me here. Yeah, you were part of that decision making that wasn't the best decision, but God sent me here, and Joseph understood that. Verse 17 goes on to say, "And Pharaoh then said to Joseph," this is why the provision comes from Pharaoh. Pharaoh himself says to Joseph, "Say to your brothers, do this. Load your animals and depart. Go to the land of Canaan. Bring your father and your households and come to me. I will give you the best of the land of Egypt, and you will eat of the fat of the land." Verse 19, "Now you are commanded, do this." This is the only time we see Pharaoh commanding Joseph to do anything. But he says, "I'm commanding you now, second in command of all my kingdom here. I'm commanding you do this for your family. Take your carts into the land of Egypt. For your little ones and your wives, bring your father and come. Also, do not be concerned about your goods, for the best of the land of Egypt is yours." What is he saying that? All that household stuff that you want to carry along, you don't have to do that, because all that we have available is going to be available to your family. You tell them now and you do this. Only God can do these type things. This was a command from a heathen king who's basically writing a blank check and saying, the best possible scenario to get your family here, I am sponsoring it. I'm going to send the wagons, I'm going to send the mules, the donkeys, and they're going to haul you here. 1 Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 2 makes a statement amid the context there of, moreover, it's required of stewards that one be found faithful. Okay, it's understood that if you are a steward of something, the obligation is to be faithful. Certainly Joseph was that. And the reward for that faithfulness now is what we're seeing here. That a pagan king, Pharaoh, foots the bill for all of this. Application. Are you entrusted with anything? Are you entrusted with a platform for the Lord? 1 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 2 demands there you be faithful in it. It's required of someone who is a steward over something to be faithful at that task, whatever that may be. Will the Lord increase that? If He increases that, the responsibility only grows with that, and the responsibility is to do it faithfully. So the provision here from Pharaoh, I want you to do this. We're sending the wagons. Your family's coming down here, and I'm going to be the one overseeing it or providing for it. So the provision was from Pharaoh, but we see in verses 21 through 24, it's through Joseph. It's through Joseph. Then the sons of Israel did so. Okay, who are the sons of Israel? Who's Israel? Who is Israel? Jacob, right? The Lord changed Jacob's name to Israel. That's why we refer to the Jewish people as the children of Israel, because his 12 sons became the 12 tribes of Israel, and so the sons of Israel. So the sons of Israel did so, and Joseph here gave them carts, according to the command of who? Pharaoh. And he gave them provisions for the journey. He gave to all of them, to each man. Notice the specificity of the scriptures here. To each man, change of garments. Carts weren't enough. Provisions weren't enough. Gave them a change of clothes as well. But to Benjamin, he gave 300 pieces of silver and 5 changes of garments. Why did Benjamin get special treatment? That was his blood brother. Of all the 12, remember there were multiple mothers and wives involved in this circumstance, but Benjamin and Joseph had the same mother. And it was that special treatment that kind of got this whole thing going, but Joseph extending that to baby brother. And he was the baby brother of the whole group. So, verse 23 there. And he sent to his fathers these things. 10 donkeys loaded with the good things of Egypt, and 10 female donkeys loaded with grain, bread, and food for his father for the journey. Verse 24, so he sent his brothers away, and they departed, and he said to them, see that you do not become troubled along the way. He's saying there is no reason for any stress, any anxiety regarding this move. There's going to be a significant shift from Canaan to Egypt, transporting everybody and everything. You don't need to worry about any of it, Joseph is saying. Pharaoh has put his stamp of approval on it. He's footing the bill. We're taking care of you. This is endorsed by Pharaoh. It's been given to me to oversee, and of course it's orchestrated by God. The Lord does nothing halfway. Nothing. Never late, always enough. Provision from Pharaoh through Joseph, and verse 25 through 28 for the family of Jacob. This is the history of Jacob, remember. We started this series with in chapter 37, verse 2, where it says, this is the history of Jacob. And then it begins, the next verses up through 45 here, talking about Joseph. But it's really about the story of Jacob and his family. And getting them to Egypt is really what this is all about. So the provisions here for the family of Jacob. Israel, the children of Israel. Verse 25 says, Then they went out of Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father. And they told him, saying, Joseph is alive. And they told him, saying, Joseph is alive, and he is governor over all the land of Egypt. And Jacob's heart stood still. You can only imagine, because he did not believe them. How long has it been?
Almost 20 years.
Okay, it was 13 years before you got him into the palace, 7 years of plenty, and 2 years of blight. So we're talking, 20 years now. Jacob thinks his son, Joseph, is dead. And suddenly he gets it, he's alive. Can you imagine what that'd be like? What a day for Jacob. What a day. He no doubt had some very anxious days along the way. Not only did he think Joseph is dead, but remember how this story is playing out. His sons go down there, one son has to stay, and then they come back and they said, we got to take baby brother. We're never going to get Simeon out unless baby brother goes with us. And we have to get that food, because if we don't get that food, we're going to die. So disheartening news came with them the last time they returned to Egypt. Remember when they returned last time, they said, oh yeah, we're all here, but Simeon's in prison back there. And we can't go back and get him out unless we take Benjamin with us. But this time here, the boys are returning, all of them, with supplies. Simeon is with them. Benjamin is with them. And he informs Jacob that Joseph is alive and well. And not only is he alive and well, he's positioned as second in charge of all of Egypt. Man, if anybody's going to give a good heart attack, it's going to be that news right there for Father Jacob there. Amid this time of famine now, don't forget that. This is a time of blight and famine. Not only does he find out his kids are all there and the one who he thought was dead is alive, they have ample food now, and they get this word that he's still alive. This is news that is too good to be true. Verse 27. But when they told him all the words which Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts which Joseph had sent to carry him, the spirit of Jacob, their father, revived. You kind of get the idea that they arrived prior to these carts with supplies. So you can picture this in your mind. They're informing it. Joseph is like dumbstruck. His heart stops hearing this. What? You're telling me I don't believe it. Joseph can't be alive. They tell him how it all played out. And then, look, see those carts coming here? Those are all coming. And Pharaoh told Joseph to send those for you. We're taking you down to see Joseph. Man, what a story. What a story here. They seemed to be trailing them as they went there. And that happened earlier as well. So, verse 28, Then Israel said, It is enough. It is enough. I'm convinced. Joseph, my son, is still alive. I will go and see him before I die. Hallelujah. Proverbs chapter 25, verse 25 would be fitting in this particular case. This is what it says. Proverbs 25:25. As cold water to a weary soul, so is good news from a far country. How this would have revived old Jacob's withering body here. Revive him to where, man, this is fantastic. What an answer to prayer. His boys were back, +1. The one he thought was dead is alive, and not only is he alive, man, talk about a success story. That was it. But let's remember the path that got them there. We cannot forget the pit, the prison, before the palace. All that hardship, all that difficulty. And there was hardship going on in Jacob's family with his kids at the same time. Because life is hard, folks. Jesus said that. Life is hard. But take courage, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. He's our hope in the midst of all of this. I've said over the years, we do the time to receive the reward. I still believe that that's true. Even the stage we are as a church. We do the time to endure the process to allow the Lord, who's not confined to time, to put time in place in order for it to unfold. That picture that I showed you of me teaching in the village at Malamanda. Man, I first went there in 1987. That was 1999. Do the time for the reward to be able to do that. It took time to learn that language. It took time to get established in there. And 12 years. 12 years of labor, but man, the reward of being able to teach the words of life to a group of people in their language that they had never heard before was thrilling. You do the time in order to receive that reward. When we abort that process, when we get discouraged, when we abandon ship, when we stop trying, what if that would have occurred? In this story that we have played out here, if that would have occurred in any of the steps along the way, what would we be talking about now? But could have been. Let's be encouraged. Let's be encouraged. God is in control of those things, and in the dark periods of life, God is still there. There's a song I want to sing, we'll sing together to end with, then we'll close in prayer, but there was no doubt some dark nights. Dark nights for Jacob. There were dark nights for his sons. Dark nights there's a group in the midst of all this that we don't even know anything about. What about the mothers? The mothers of these boys, with all that they went through. Rachel thinking that her oldest is killed. And then the thought of maybe not the youngest not coming back. Okay, ripping the mother's hearts out in all of this. Were there some dark nights? Absolutely there were.
How are you going to feed your kids?
How are you going to feed your kids? They're all going to die out there. You know, all of that involved in the process as well. So there were some dark nights in all of this, but the Lord was in the dark nights. And that's what this song